One of the traps we can fall into as fathers, often without even realizing it, is the amount of pressure that we're putting onto our kids. We can add some pressure, create pressure, and then add even more pressure on top of that. And there are times when this is obvious, when it's clear that pressure is being added from dad. The dad who insists that his son or his daughter must be the best player on the team, the MVP. The dad who insists that his daughter or son must get straight A's all throughout school and get into a specific college. That has to happen. Dads who do this usually will openly justify that pressure. They know they're doing it. They're proud of doing it. But I'm not talking about that issue today. Today, I'm talking about the dads who don't even realize the amount of pressure that they're putting onto their own kids. These are usually the good dads, the involved dads, the loving dads, but they're also often the pressure-filled dads. This pressure, it comes in a very different way. It's through the books that dads require their kids to read and then give a full report on. It's through the activities that the dads require their kids to participate in. Now, these dads, they might say, well, the kid doesn't have to be the starter or the best player on the team, but the kid still has to go. The kid has to compete. The kid has to always give his best, to never quit, and so on. And at first, all of those things, they sound good. They all sound positive. And I'm not going to tell you if they're good or bad. That's not my call to make for you or for your family. But what I will share here, however, is that absolutely is adding pressure. And now you might say, well, that pressure is good. Kids need to learn how to handle pressure. They need to learn how to follow through. And again, there's nothing wrong with teaching kids how to handle pressure and how to follow through. I think that's part of our jobs as dads. But there's definitely a line that can be crossed here. And the thing is, it's not difficult to cross that line and end up exasperating your children, leading them into a direction that you never intended. You can put so much pressure on your kids that it leads them to anger, including inward anger. And unfortunately, then that can end up towards themselves and towards you. So you have to be very careful here. This is part of what Ephesians 6:4 is speaking to when Paul says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord." Or in the NLT translation, it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring that up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." When we put so much pressure on our kids and when we're not careful, that pressure can lead to some undesired outcomes. One way that you know you're putting too much pressure on your kid is if you're otherwise good, happy, normal kid, right? If there's an increase in lying and hiding things from you, there might be too much pressure. In the context of this conversation, that's often done out of fear. Fear of the reprisal from dad, fear of the disappointment from dad. And when kids feel this pressure, when they're exhausted like this, they're afraid of failing, they're scared to meet their father's expectations, they're constantly worried about disappointing their fathers and so on. And sometimes I'll hear dads, they'll tell me things like, well, I asked my son and he wanted to do this. Or I told my daughter she doesn't have to do this and so on. But there's often an unsaid message in there that it's, I'll be disappointed if you don't do this, but you can choose what you want. Now, here's something really important for you to grasp in this. And this applies actually to all of your relationships, but in the context of parenting here. If your kids don't truly have the option to say no without openly disappointing you, then they can't really give you a heart-filled yes. It's more likely going to be a yes out of obligation and wanting to meet your expectation, and that really isn't a yes at all. If you haven't given your kids permission to say no without you being fully at peace with that and with no consequences to them, then they can't really say yes. So guys, don't exasperate your children. Don't provoke them to anger or to lying or to hiding things or cheating or anything like that. Instead, focus on teaching them in the ways of the Lord and leading them to Jesus. Everything else is a distant second. Everything is a distant second. God has to be first. Jesus has to be first. Focus your energy as a father there and let the other things fall into the distant second place position where they belong. On a related note, I teach through a lot of parenting topics like this in the Significant Man Basecamp experience. We get into a lot of details on raising sons and raising daughters. And Basecamp, it's 4 days, it's 3 nights, it's an immersion event in the Colorado mountains. We do lots of fun stuff, rock climbing and rappelling, outdoor activities, all around teaching things like parenting and being a better husband and being a better leader, a better father, all of those things. It's a great, great, great experience. If you're interested in that, head over to significantman.com and check out the Basecamp experience. Now, please be sure to subscribe to this show, rate it, and leave a review. Your ratings, your reviews, they really help other people find the show, so thank you for that. All right, enjoy the next show.